In this video, we're going to talk about how to use Bubble plus plugins, APIs, potentially some third-party services to help you build your no-code tech stack. Now, we're not going to dive too deeply into what tech stacks are. We have another video on that if you want to jump over there, but we're going to talk about how to build your tech stack using Bubble as a base and then adding on plugins, third-party services, APIs to help you expand your app even more broadly. Now, what I want you to take away from this are a couple of things. Number one, an understanding of what's possible. We're actually going to go through 3 different example apps and build out the tech stacks for each. So you can see what's possible with no code, what's possible with Bubble, maybe what's possible for you and your own app. And I also want to show you that you can build more than just what you can actually get your hands on within your app when you're using no-code tools. So you can expand your app beyond just what you can personally build by using some of these other tools and APIs and plugins. And it can really help take your no-code app to the next level. So that's what we're going to jump into today. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because we also have a new series of videos coming out that I want you to get in on, and it's also going to touch on some of these app examples that we're going to go over today. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help non-technical entrepreneurs build custom apps so they can start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses all without coding. So we're going to go through tech stacks today, and we're going to talk about 3 specific types of apps, and we'll actually create some examples of the tech stacks or what these tech stacks could look like for these types of apps. The first app is an ERP app. So this is an enterprise resource planning app, and this is an app that is used to help run internal business processes. The next app we're going to go over is a marketplace app. So we'll look at what a tech stack could look like for a marketplace app. And then we're going to talk about general file storage or file management apps. This can be applied to tons of different use cases, but we'll go through an example of that and talk about what that tech stack can look like as well. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen here, and we will jump over to the whiteboard. So I have the very beginnings of a pyramid on the screen, and we're going to sort of create our tech stack in layers. Now, remember, what I want you to take away from this is, 1, an understanding of just what's possible with these types of apps, with your app. I pulled these specific examples because we see a lot of our own clients building these types of apps. And so there's a good chance that your own app might overlap with some of this as well. So I want you to see what's possible. And I also want you to see that you can create so much more than what you personally are going to be building in your app. And so if all of the features and the functionality that you've had in mind for your app seem maybe a little bit daunting, well, you don't have to build everything yourself. In other words, you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time, which saves you time on development and ultimately saves you time over the long run with management, maintenance of your app. So going back to the whiteboard here, let's first talk about a tech stack, an example tech stack for an ERP app. So an enterprise resource planning app, an app just to help run internal business processes. Now, this type of app can come in so many different shapes and forms, but we're going to put our own example together. And the example we're going to use is an app that is used to help evaluate employee performance. Okay, so kind of like a staff management app, but really for evaluating performance. And the example use case for this, and this is what we see a lot of people doing, is this app is going to be built for, let's say it's my app. It's going to be built for my own business's use first. And then once I use it and refine it, iterate it, then I'm going to package it up and sell it as a SaaS product later on. So software as a service product to other businesses like mine. And this is how a lot of non-technical founders, when they're coming into the space, this is how they want to streamline their own businesses, and then later down the road, add on another revenue stream on top of their business. So this is our ERP example. Now, we like to use bubble.io as our hub no-code development platform. And the reason is because Bubble really gives you a blank canvas when it comes to everything, all the components of your app, your database, your backend, the front end, so your design, your user interface, and everything in between. So you can create pretty much anything you want on Bubble, and anything that you don't create on Bubble, you can often and usually connect to via API and plugins. And again, we'll get into that. So in looking at this base pyramid here, we're going to go ahead and draw out the first layer. So if this is our tech stack, then what we're going to do is place Bubble right at the bottom, because this is where we're going to be building the core functionality of our app. Now, in this example of our ERP, what we might be building on Bubble are staff profiles, right? So if this is staff management, evaluation, we'll have the ability to create our staff profiles, have the ability to input and track metrics so we can evaluate the performance, have the ability to store documents related to different staff members, and maybe we'll have the ability to schedule staff reviews. So maybe monthly one-on-one reviews with staff. So we can think of Bubble housing those capabilities at the core. But for some of the niche functionality or some of the features that we want to add on to that, we can use plugins and APIs to expand that core. Now, in another video we go into when to use APIs and when to build out from scratch on Bubble, or when to use plugins and APIs and when to build from scratch. And you can check that out for a deeper dive into that. But generally, you can build most things in Bubble. If you want to build something really custom that another service doesn't offer, then you can build that out in Bubble. And if you want to get some sort of feature up and running really quickly, it's a simple feature that doesn't need a lot of customization, you can use a third-party service. So for example, and we'll go into this a little bit later in this example, but let's say you want to build a really simple scheduling feature. Well, you can use an integration with something like Calendly or Acuity if you don't want to build out your own. So if you just don't want to reinvent the wheel, then you could do that. But let's say you were building a really complex booking feature that had a lot of specifications, and it was either going to be too hard to find an out-of-the-box solution like that, or maybe just too expensive. Maybe the one you're using would involve compromises. It's not really made for businesses like yours, and so it's just not the right fit. Well, then you could build your own. Okay, so that's just an aside there. And again, you can take a deeper dive into that. But in coming back to our ERP example, we'll have Bubble at the bottom, and then we're going to add another layer on top of that here. Okay, so in this ERP example, let's say that we want to use we want to have the ability to view staff performance and metrics that we've tracked in charts and graphs. So what we can do for that is use a chart.js or use the chart.js plugin. So I'm going to pull that up on the screen here. So if you go to Bubble's plugin marketplace, you can find this as well. But essentially, this just lets you display charts and graphs really easily on Bubble. So you could use something like this and add on to your tech stack. So you're not necessarily doing all the heavy lifting, but you can still get this feature within your app. Okay, so we'll bring that back and come back over to the whiteboard here. So we have Bubble that houses our core functionality. We're going to stack chart.js on top of that. And then what we can do is add even another layer. And what we'll put here is select PDF. Okay, you might have heard of this before, but this essentially lets you print PDFs. So let's say that you want to have the ability to export or to print the pages on your app as PDFs. So you can take these pages, turn them into PDFs, and print them. Because if you're printing from a website or a web app just directly without having a tool like this behind the scenes, it's not going to come out as clean and as clear as you want it to. So you can use something like the Select PDF API. So instead of going to Bubble's plugin marketplace, you could come over to the Select PDF API documentation site, grab your API keys, and go ahead and get this set up. And I'll link all these things below so that you can check them out as well. But remember, these are just examples. There's different tools and different ways you can accomplish these things. But for the sake of simplicity and showing you what's possible, this is one of the things that you could do. So if you want this type of functionality, well, you can achieve it without having to actually go in and do all the heavy lifting yourself. Now, on top of that, let's say you want to have a little bit more complex functionality. And what I'm going to do is pull over another API documentation here. So let's say you want to send report data to more complex templates. Okay, so maybe like tax documents or contracts or something like that. All right, well, you could do that with the DocSpring API. So I'm over on the DocSpring page here. There's API documentation. And again, this is just an example, but the way to figure out whether there is an API for a service like this. So if you are thinking up the features, the functionality of your app, and you want something that you know is going to be pretty complex to build and you want to integrate with a third-party service, well, you can just do a quick search on Google for the type of functionality that you're looking for. And if you were to come across something like DocSpring, for example, and you can do this again on any service or tool, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, usually you'll see a section for developers, and you'll see something that says documentation or API documentation. And that will show you whether the service has an API, which will allow you to connect it to your Bubble app or not. Okay, so it's a good sort of rule of thumb to keep in mind as you're exploring your own options. But again, going back to our example app, this is something that we might want to add in there. So we'd use that DocSpring API. So I'm going to add that to our tech stack as well. And make that a little bit easier to read. Okay, so we're at the top of our tech stack now. And one of the things I mentioned previously, and then we'll go back to, is let's say in our app, we want the ability to schedule reviews with our staff. So we're monitoring, evaluating their performance, and maybe we want to have a notification of when it's time to get a review going. Maybe we have an email sent out to the employee themselves to go ahead and book a performance review call with their manager directly from a calendar that shows a block of availability. So again, you could build something like this right within Bubble if you wanted to, but if you just want something quick and out of the box, then we'll go back to our Calendly example that I mentioned before. You could just have a really simple Calendly integration, which allows this all to happen without you having to do any of the real heavy lifting yourself. So this can be your ERP tech stack. Now, remember, ERPs come in tons of different shapes and sizes. And so this is just one general example to show you, again, what's possible and that you can really expand your app well beyond what you personally build. So this is our ERP tech stack. Now, I want to go through our marketplace tech stack as well, because I know that's going to be helpful for a lot of people. So let me just clear us out here. And with a marketplace app, we're looking at two-sided apps where we have the buyer on one side, the seller on the other, and marketplace apps have tons of use cases as well. So you can be looking at job board apps. So maybe you have companies and applicants versus buyers and sellers, or maybe you are looking at an e-commerce app. So you do have buyers and sellers, but either way, marketplace apps have a pretty straightforward core functionality, which is that vendor side, the buyer side, or you can look at it as the supply and the demand, the ability to list and the ability to search and then exchange. So payments structure of some sort will come into play. So in looking at our marketplace example, what we're going to use specifically is the example of a real estate marketplace app. So we're going to look at listing real estate properties for sale. So the properties are listed as available and people can come on, search for properties and set up times to go and view those properties. So that's our marketplace example. And we're going to go through this same process of building out this marketplace tech stack. So again, we're going to look at having Bubble at the core. And the reason for this, while you can build marketplace apps on other no-code platforms, is because we like using Bubble. Like I said before, it gives a blank canvas, a ton of control, a ton of power. And so you can really create anything you want. You can customize anything you want. So you have a high level of control, which a lot of people like. That's one of the reasons why our clients want to build these types of apps on Bubble. And so we'll put that at the bottom for our marketplace app because it's very commonly used for marketplace apps. So within that core foundation of our tech stack, we're going to have the features in this example of creating the listings side, creating the viewer or the prospective buyer's side, and then creating a search feature. So again, those basic core marketplace components, creating the two sides and then connecting them. Okay, so that's what would be housed in this base level of Bubble. Now, on top of that, we're going to look at something a little bit different from our ERP, and this is integrating payment. So with our ERP example, we were building it for our own use first, and so we didn't have any payment in there. But with a marketplace app, we need to have a way to exchange these services, and marketplace apps very, very commonly are going to have some sort of pretty straightforward payment structure. You can have some different ways to collect payment. You might be doing it as a percentage or a commission. It might be a one-off fee. Depending on how you do it, though, you're likely going to use something like Stripe to create your payments. Now, if you haven't looked into creating your payments yet or your payment functionality, Stripe is going to be one of your best bets. Now, there are some instances where Stripe might not be the best option. This might depend on where you are in the world, but it's the most common payment platform that we see being used. And there are lots of different use cases for it. So you can see on the screen here, you can create a payment or a checkout specifically for marketplaces. So again, all of that heavy lifting is done for you. You can create custom payment setups within Bubble and still connect to something like Stripe just to collect the payment, or you can use some of Stripe's out of the box landing pages to make it simple for you. It really depends on what you want, but regardless, you'd be using a payment gateway like Stripe behind all of it to actually do the processing of the payments. So we're going to add that on top of our tech stack here so that we can create those marketplace payments. And then we're going to get a little bit more niche here. So with this marketplace example, we don't want to just have people uploading their own listings, and we certainly don't want to do the heavy lifting of uploading tons of listings. So what we're going to do is pull from existing sources of listings to display more listings inside our app, again, without having to do all of that heavy lifting, which is probably a trend you've picked up on here. So what we're going to do is add another level to our tech stack here, and we're going to use an API. So what I want to do is add on Zillow's API. And I'll pull that over on the screen here so you can see it. But essentially, we can aggregate a lot of our listings, a lot of the data for our listings so that, like I said, we don't have to do the heavy lifting. And this, just to go back to what we were talking about a little earlier, if you find a service that has a lot of the information that you might need, or potentially a feature or a functionality that you might need, like Zillow, because you might be just on Zillow itself and obviously not seeing anything related to APIs, but by finding the API documentation or just doing a quick Google search for example, Zillow API, just to even see if the service offers an API, then the first thing you'd find would be this page here, which it has all the API documentation. So just remember that even if you don't know how you will achieve some sort of feature or functionality in your app, a quick search can reveal a lot of helpful information for you. So just keep that in mind. So we're adding our Zillow API onto our tech stack. And then I want to do a really similar one and put on here apartments.com API. Okay, so this would be for our apartment data. And same exact thing here. If you go onto apartments.com, the API documentation is not going to be the first thing that you see. And so you might not know it exists, but with a really quick search, or just by scrolling down to the bottom of the page and looking in the footer, usually, you can find this type of information and you can make your job as the developer so much easier. Okay, so we're adding the apartments.com API onto our tech stack. And then we're going to actually add one more. And this is something that I haven't made the distinction of yet, but sometimes your tech stack is going to be for user-facing tools. So the users are going to be interacting with the data that's pulled from apartments.com or from Zillow. But sometimes your tech stack will involve tools or services that are for internal purposes. So for admin purposes, for you as the developer potentially, or for if you're selling your app and there are going to be other admins who are going to need to see their own internal information, which is obviously common, then for them as well. So as an internal tool that we're adding onto our tech stack, I'm going to actually go back to the chart.js that we went over before. And this can help buyers, or it can help visualize the buyers and the sellers stats and the property stats to that app admin. So pulling it over here on the screen, again, this is the same exact landing page that we were on earlier, but you can see how a tool like this can be applied to lots of different use cases, and not only to different use cases, but to different users as well. So not just the end users seeing the data being visualized, but the admins of the app as well, or potentially yourself. You can see how that data is visualized. And so you're just really building out that internal side of your app and using your tech stack for that as well. So that's going to wrap up our marketplace tech stack. So different example, but hopefully you can start to see how this can work, how you can figure out what your tech stack might look like, how you can search for the different tools available, how you can use those tools differently, both internally and externally. Okay, so hopefully this is starting to all come together, and I want to go through one more, and we're just going to start from scratch instead of doing a lot of erasing this time. So the last app example we're going to go through is that document storage app. Okay, now, again, there are lots of different use cases for this, tons of them. This can be a consumer-focused app. It can be an app for service-based businesses, depending on how you use it, but we're really looking at housing storing documents, managing them, using them, and it involves a lot of organization. So you can almost think of it like a project management app in a way, but distilled to just be focused on document management. So the use case example that we're going to go through for this one is keeping all of your home related documentation stored and organized and easily accessible. So let's say you have a home and you want to hold on to everything related to buying your home, managing your home, maintaining it, renovations, anything like that, selling your home, home value, you name it. And you want to store all the documents and make sure they're managed properly, make sure they're organized, and make sure that you have them on hand. Okay, so that's the use case example that we're going to look at. Now, again, we see a lot of our own clients building some shape or form of this type of app, which is why we're digging into this one, and which is why, again, we're looking at Bubble at the base of our tech stack here. So let's say with Bubble, we're going to be creating the ability for users to come on and create their own profiles, to upload their information, obviously to search and to filter through that information so they can easily access it, potentially to even schedule reminders. So maybe there is some upcoming bill that needs to be paid, or some upcoming maintenance that needs to be scheduled, something like that. Well, we can set reminders and we can archive things like that. So again, managing, storing all the documents. So that's at the base of our tech stack. Now we're going to add to this, and we're going to start with some different APIs. And this is going to be for storage. And you might have come across questions about this if you have been looking at building any type of app that stores documents like this. So what we're going to add first is a service called Upload Care. We're going to connect to their API. So I'm going to pull that over on the screen so that you can see it here. But essentially, if you're building this type of app, one of the things you're going to want to keep in mind is that Bubble's file storage, you can store files on Bubble. So you don't have to use something like this for file storage. But there's a limit depending on which plan you're on, which is obviously normal, right? But you might not want to have to force yourself within that limit. You really might not have an option. You might know that you're going to go beyond that limit. And so I'm not going to go over the limits because it's best to go to their pricing and plans page. In case there's ever any adjustments, you can see the most accurate information there, but it'll show you what amount of storage is included in each plan. But you want to keep that in mind. If you know that you're going to go over and you'll end up having to pay more for the storage, then you can use a third-party storage solution like this that could offer you just better pricing and make it easier for you as you scale. So for our example here of our doc storage app, where we're uploading a lot of documentation and we anticipate our users really uploading a lot, because we're talking about, the average time span of home ownership is going to be years of time, and there's a lot of documents that are going to be uploaded. So we're going to use something like this. We're going to use the Upload Care API, which is just going to help with our storage. Okay, so that's the next level of our tech stack here. And then we're also going to add another sort of a similar service, but for video storage. So let's say on these, now I'm really going off the cuff here, but let's say we have inspection videos that we want our users to be able to upload. Let's say if they are preparing to sell their house themselves, they want to record videos and store those so that they can set themselves up for an easy selling process. Again, really just spitballing examples here, but for the sake of this example, we're going to use something called the MuxInMuX API, and this is going to be for video storage. I'm going to pull this over here as well, just so you can see it. But like we talked about with some of these tools, some of them are going to benefit your users, and some of them are going to benefit you as or an admin. And this is something that is going to be really beneficial on the admin side, this and the upload care, because again, it's going to lower likely your pricing, the costs involved with your overall file storage over the long run. So this would be, if we wanted to add some video storage into our app example, then this is one that I'm adding to our tech stack. Okay, so we're going to add 2 more to this doc storage tech stack. So one is the Air Document Viewer plugin. I'm going to pull this over on the screen here as well. Okay, so this is a plugin that you can see right here. The document viewer allows you to easily preview Microsoft and Google documents inside the app without downloading the files. I've used apps that don't allow you to do this. You have to, in order to view the files, you have to download them. You've probably done the same. It can get really cumbersome, a bit frustrating on the user side of things when you just want to quickly see a document. And so this could be a really great plugin to add on top of our tech stack to use within our app, just to expand the functionality a little bit more, make that user experience a little bit cleaner. And again, I'll link to all these below if you think they'd be helpful tools for you, but just another example here. And then the last one we're going to add, we're actually going to go right back to that chart.js example. And what we're going to use that for in this example is to help visualize the buyer and seller stats. So let's say that we are prepping that home for sale again, and we want to, let's say we want to visualize the data from when we initially bought it, and we want to now compare that to the data that we're finding now that it comes time to sell the home. So you can see our example here is evolving a little bit, but hopefully this makes sense for you, because I wanted to stick this chart.js example back at the top of the tech stack just to show you how flexible some of these tools can be. And so again, I'm talking about that exact same one we were looking at, and I'm coming back to this specific one as an example because it's just it's a good example across all of these apps, but you can find lots of tools like this that you can use for tons of different use cases, both user-facing, admin-facing, and really just expand the functionality of your app without you having to do all of that heavy lifting. Okay, so this is our document storage app tech stack example. So I hope this helps you understand those 2 things. Number one, what's possible, because hopefully you can see throughout these 3 different examples and these very different examples that you can achieve so much. And really importantly, that it's not all dependent on that core platform you use. Now, if you're going to be building out a tech stack like this and viewing your development in this way, you need that base platform to allow you to do something like this. You need to be able to connect to these APIs, potentially use plugins to do a lot of the heavy lifting with the API connections. So the platform needs to enable that, but you don't have to build really any of these things, because these services are all doing it for you, right? You're just connecting to them. And so it makes your development so much easier. And when you are stepping into the no-code space, especially when you don't have a technical background, which is super common, then using no-code tools, there's still a learning curve. But when you're coming into it and you're thinking about the learning curve of, for example, one platform alone, then thinking about all of these as well and putting all of this functionality into your app can feel intimidating. It can feel overwhelming. Sometimes it can feel like it might not be possible, but you can build, or you can create so much more than what you personally build. And so that's the other thing that I really want you to get out of this. So I hope this is helpful for you. All of these examples that we went over can also have additional tools. You can expand within this stack, but think about, for example, as you build your app into a business and you're looking at other sides of the business or other components, the sales side, the marketing side, well, you can start adding no-code tools onto your tech stack to help with those as well. So let's say you use something like ActiveCampaign, which is an email marketing service, and it also has a sales pipeline functionality within it. So let's say that you are managing a sales process and you want a tool to help make that easier to manage your contacts, manage them as they go through the sales process. Well, you could use ActiveCampaign, which would be like adding on to your no-code tech stack, but for your business. So even though that's not going to be happening within the app itself, but you could connect it. You can add on things for the sales side. If you want to use something like lead pages or ClickFunnels, and you want to create sales funnels to bring prospective users in and then convert them, well, you could use no-code tools for that as well. So you're just, again, expanding onto your tech stack more and more. And so that's how I want you to think about the development of your app, but also the development of your business. Because again, it can feel like a lot, especially if you're a solo founder or a small team. It can feel like a lot and like it's not doable, but it is. And especially if you think about it this way, it's going to help you out as you move forward to just relieve a little bit of the pressure and also kind of get the ideas flowing just on what's possible for your app. So I mentioned at the beginning of this video that we have a new series coming out, and the first video at the time I'm recording this just landed. It's about building marketplace apps. Now, these are the new series that's coming out is about different types of apps. So we went through a few different types of apps in this video today. In this new series, it's going to talk about how to build these different types of apps, the core components that are going to go into them, and how to actually get your hands on some of the development and start building out your own app. So the first app that we're looking at in the series is marketplace apps. We'll go through other app types as well, but check out the video for that and make sure you subscribe to the channel below, because as these new videos in the series come out, you're going to want to really just jump into them right away so you can continue building out your app, getting everything correct, and just making sure that, again, the process isn't harder on you than it should be. So subscribe to the channel, keep an eye out for that video. I'll link the first one below so that you can see the rest of the series. And thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.